I never imagined that at 44, I'd be having sex with a girl 20 years younger than me. And I certainly didn't expect it to be out of revenge. But that's the thing about life. Just when you think you've seen it all, it throws you a curveball. A vicious, gut-wrenching curveball. But before I get ahead of myself, let me start from the beginning. Let me introduce myself. My name's Sam. Middle-aged, average guy, nothing too special to write about, at least not until all this went down. I've been married to Melissa for 16 years. We met in our late 20s back when I was more optimistic and had fewer grays. She was the type of woman who could light up a room, make anyone feel important, and frankly, I liked that. Made me feel like the luckiest guy in the world. Our marriage? Well, it was what it was. Not perfect, but then again, what marriage is. We had our ups and downs, but I never thought it was anything we couldn't handle. We weren't the couple who fawned over each other all the time, and sure, we had our share of fights, but we'd always find our way back. Or so I thought. Now, I know I was just another naive husband thinking everything would be fine as long as we pushed through. And then there's Jason, my so-called best friend. We've known each other for nearly 20 years, ever since we worked together back in the day. The guy's been through hell. Lost his wife in a car accident about 10 years ago. Left him with his daughter, Emma, who was just 10 at the time. I remember how broken he was. That first year, he was barely functioning. Melissa and I were there for him every step of the way, especially Melissa. She really took on a motherly role with Emma, almost like she was trying to fill the void left behind by Jason's wife. Emma was always over at our house. She practically grew up there. She called me Uncle Sam, and over time, she got comfortable enough to confide in me things she wouldn't tell her dad. You know how it is. Teenagers don't always feel comfortable sharing everything with their parents. I thought of her like a little sister, and she probably saw me as more of an older brother than anything else. She'd come to me with her teenage drama, boys' school, all that stuff. Jason appreciated it. At least I thought he did. We lived close by, so they'd often drop by unannounced, just like family. It was normal. Hell, Jason was practically a fixture in our home. But what I never realized was that this familiarity would turn into something way darker. One day, it all came crashing down. I wasn't supposed to be home that day. I'd been at work grinding through the usual when this sharp stomach pain hit me out of nowhere. My boss, a decent guy, told me to take the rest of the day off and head home. So I did, thinking I'd crawl into bed and sleep it off. Except I never made it to my bed, because when I pulled into my driveway, Jason's car was parked there. Again, not weird. He'd often leave it there when he'd drop by, grab a drink, or talk shop with me. But something felt off. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but something was gnawing at me. The front door was locked. Now, that wasn't like Melissa. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where no one locked doors during the day, especially if we had guests over. But there it was, locked. So I pulled out my keys, walked in, and everything was silent. Too silent. And then I heard it, faint at first, but unmistakable. The sounds of moaning, gasps, and muffled words. My heart stopped. My brain couldn't process it. No, no, no. This isn't happening. But it was. I didn't think. I just acted. My legs carried me upstairs, moving faster than my brain could catch up. I walked down that hallway, and every step felt like I was stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't go up there unarmed either. Grabbing the bat from the closet on the way up, I knew someone was about to pay for this. When I reached the bedroom door, I stood there for what felt like an eternity, and then I pushed it open. I wasn't ready for what I saw. There she was, my wife of 16 years, straddling my best friend. They froze. They saw me standing there, bat in hand, and the color drained from their faces. Melissa's mouth hung open, but no words came out. Jason scrambled off the bed like a scared rat. I didn't say a word. I just walked up to him and swung the bat to the floor, hard enough to crack the wood. He flinched, but I wasn't aiming for him. Not yet. I didn't need to say anything. The betrayal was plastered across both of their faces. Melissa, ever the manipulator, finally found her voice. Sam, wait. Don't. Don't do anything stupid, please. Let's talk. Talk? Talk. After this, I dropped the bat on the floor and punched Jason square in the face. Then again, and again. The third punch split his lip, blood dribbling down his chin. Melissa screamed, trying to pull me off him, but I was too far gone to care. What the fuck, man? Jason finally spat out, eyes wide in panic. Sam, it's not what it looks like. How long? I growled, my voice shaking. How long has this been going on? Neither of them could answer me. Pathetic. I didn't wait for their excuses. I left. I grabbed the bat, walked out the front door, and smashed the windshield of Jason's car, dented the hood, and broke the side mirrors. The whole time I just kept thinking, how the hell did it come to this? I got in my own car and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first, but then it hit me. I needed a drink. No, I needed to get fucking hammered. So I drove to the bar. The one place where everything always made sense, where the world didn't feel so twisted. I walked into the bar, still gripping the bat in my hand, like it was my last line of defense against the chaos my life had turned into. The regulars were there, nursing their drinks, lost in their own problems. I didn't say a word as I sat down at the counter, but I could feel the weight of their eyes on me. It wasn't every day you saw a guy like me show up at noon, especially looking the way I did, like I'd just come back from war. Whiskey, I muttered, not even glancing up at the bartender. I didn't need to. He already knew. Gary was his name. Good guy. Seen a lot of shit over the years. He'd been working at that bar for as long as I could remember, always there with a wisecrack or a shoulder to lean on, depending on what you needed. He didn't ask questions. Just poured the whiskey and set the glass in front of me. I downed it in one gulp, the burn barely registering as it hit my throat. By the time I ordered my third glass, Gary leaned in a little closer, raising an eyebrow. Everything all right, Sam? Not like you to show up here before the sun's down. His voice had that steady calm, like he'd heard 1,000 sob stories before. But there was a hint of concern in there, too. Nobody had ever seen me like this. Not in all the years I'd been coming here. I laughed. A short, bitter laugh that sounded more like a bark. You ever walking on your wife fucking your best friend? Gary's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't look surprised. Like he'd heard it all before. Shit, he said, letting out a low whistle. That's rough, man. Rough doesn't even begin to cover it. I muttered, swirling the whiskey in my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. I stared at it like it might give me some kind of answer, like it could somehow make sense of everything. But it didn't. Nothing did. I don't know why I told him everything. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe I just needed to get it out of my system before it ate me alive. But I told him every single thing. I told him about walking in on them, the look on their faces, the sound of that bat cracking against the floor. I told him about smashing Jason's car, about the punches, about how I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Gary listened, didn't interrupt. When I was done, he patted me on the shoulder, his hand heavy but comforting. That's a shitty situation, man. No other way to put it. I nodded, staring at the empty glass in front of me. Shitty didn't even cover it. But listen, Gary continued, leaning in a little closer. The main thing here is not to break down. Don't let them win. I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. What would you do if you were me? Gary didn't miss a beat. Me? Well, I'd probably do what you're doing now. Get drunk off my ass, maybe break something. Hell, let's make that official. He grabbed a glass, poured himself a whiskey, and clinked it against mine. To shitty friends and cheating wives. I smirked at that, the first genuine emotion I'd felt all day. We both downed our drinks in one go. But after that, he continued, setting his glass down with a thud. I want revenge. The kind that leaves them with nothing. Take everything from them. Your wife, your so-called friend. Make them regret the day they ever crossed you. I stared at him. His words hit me harder than the whiskey. Revenge. It was what I wanted, wasn't it? To make them suffer. To tear their lives apart the way they'd torn mine. I'll do it, I said, my voice low but firm. I'm going to take them down. Leave them with nothing. Gary gave me a nod of approval, but his face softened a bit. Just be smart about it, Sam. You're a good guy. Don't let this turn you into something you're not. By the time the hours had passed, I was so drunk I couldn't see straight. I didn't know how I was going to get home, and honestly, I didn't care. I was too lost in my thoughts, in the haze of whiskey and rage. Gary must have seen it. Before I could even think about stumbling out to my car, he slid his hand across the counter and snatched my keys. You're not driving anywhere, Sam. Pick these up when you're sober. I opened my mouth to argue, but the truth was, I was in no condition to fight. So I just nodded and slumped back onto the stool. Taxi's on the way, Gary said, already on the phone. When the cab showed up, I barely made it into the back seat without falling over. The driver didn't say a word, thank God. He just drove, and I spent the whole ride staring out the window, the city blurring by like it wasn't even real. I don't remember much after that. Just stumbling through the front door of my house, the place where it all started. It felt so empty, like a hollow shell of the life I used to have. I collapsed onto the couch, still fully dressed, and passed out. The next morning, I woke up with the worst hangover of my life. My head felt like it had been run over by a truck. My mouth was dry as hell, and every muscle in my body ached. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. By the time I crawled off the couch that afternoon, my head was still pounding from the hangover. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I knew what I had to do next. The divorce wasn't just going to happen by itself. I needed to start taking action. I grabbed my phone and called the first divorce lawyer I could think of. A guy named Rick I'd met a few years back at a work event. We talked here and there, and I knew he handled ugly situations like mine. Rick, it's Sam. I need to talk about a divorce. I said flatly, not in the mood for small talk. Damn, Sam. I didn't expect this call from you, Rick said, his voice somewhere between surprised and sympathetic. All right, give me the rundown. I gave him the basics, Melissa, the infidelity, how long we'd been married. I didn't hold back on the details. Not with Rick. He needed to know everything if I was going to make sure Melissa didn't walk away with a damn thing. When I hung up, I felt a little better. Just a little. That's when I saw it. Melissa's laptop sitting on the dining room table. Her work laptop. She had some big presentation the next day. She'd been talking about it for weeks. It was the type of thing that could make or break her standing in the company, and I knew how much she'd been stressing over it. And then it hit me, a way to take my revenge, to make her life just a little bit harder. I sat down and opened the laptop, skimming through her files until I found the presentation. I wasn't some tech wizard, but I knew enough to make a few changes that would screw things up for her. I scrolled through the slides, trying to figure out where to strike. And then I had the idea. Melissa's meeting was with some executives from a Korean company. I did a quick Google search, found some offensive stuff that could rub them the wrong way. Subtle, but enough to cause awkwardness. I placed it smack in the middle of the presentation, hidden just enough that it wouldn't be caught until it was too late. I also threw in a few indecent images, strategically placing them toward the center of the slides. Not right at the start where she'd catch it during a quick skim, but far enough in that she'd be caught off guard in the middle of her big moment. I wasn't going to ruin just her marriage. I was going to mess with her whole life. My head was still throbbing, so I popped a couple of painkillers and lay down. By the evening, I felt better, just in time for Melissa to come home. She walked in like nothing had happened, probably thinking she could talk her way out of this mess like she always did. Sam, we need to talk, she started, her voice calm, but with that edge to it that I'd come to hate. I didn't even look at her. Go to hell, Melissa. We're getting a divorce. She didn't miss a beat. You're a fool, she spat, crossing her arms, probably thinking I'd just cooled down after a while, like this was some petty argument about money or dinner plans. We'll see who the fool is, I snapped back, standing up and heading out to the porch. I didn't have anywhere to go. Neither did she. The house was big enough for both of us, but that night, it felt like a prison. There was no way I was going to sleep next to her, so I figured I'd just crash on the couch again. But as it turned out, I didn't even make it through the night at home. It was a few hours after midnight when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was another spam call, but then I saw the name on the screen, Emma. Jason's daughter. I answered, my voice groggy. Hello. At first, I couldn't make out what she was saying. Her words were slurred, jumbled. But after a minute, it became clear. She was drunk. Very drunk. She'd been at some party and couldn't get home. So she called me, of all people, to pick her up. She didn't want her dad to know, and I guess I was the only one she thought she could trust. So I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and headed out. When I arrived at the address she'd given me, Emma was leaning against a wall, barely able to stand. The smell of alcohol hit me from a mile away as she stumbled toward the car. I opened the door for her, and she practically fell into the passenger seat. "What the hell, Emma?" I said, more out of concern than anger. "This isn't like you." She waved me off, her head lolling against the seat. My boyfriend. He cheated on me," she mumbled, almost crying but still with that strange smile on her face. Drunk, emotional, and confused. It was a mess. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. I knew exactly what that felt like. "You're not the only one who's been betrayed," I said, keeping my eyes on the road. She turned toward me, her drunken curiosity piqued. "Who else?" I sighed and told her, in short, about what had happened with Melissa and Jason. I didn't go into the ugly details, but it was enough for her to get the picture. "Oh, Uncle Sam," she whispered, leaning closer, her hand landing on my leg. "I'm so sorry." At first, I thought she was just being comforting, but her hand didn't stop there. It moved slowly up and down my leg, and I felt my whole body tense. "Emma, stop," I said, taking her hand and moving it away. But she didn't stop. She kept touching me, her drunken flirtation obvious now. "I want to make you feel better," she whispered, her hand wandering back to my thigh. I resisted. I really did. But the anger, the betrayal, the alcohol, it all came crashing together. I don't know when, but at some point I stopped caring. Maybe it was revenge. Maybe it was just the alcohol talking. But when she unzipped my fly and bent down, I didn't stop her. She was good. I wasn't thinking about Jason or Melissa anymore. Just the moment, the twisted satisfaction of knowing I was crossing a line I could never uncross. When she was done, she leaned back and smiled, her lipstick smeared, her makeup a mess. "There's a hotel nearby," she said, her voice low and suggestive. "You don't want to go home, and neither do I." I didn't argue. We went to the hotel and spent the rest of the night in bed, doing things I never thought I'd be capable of with Emma. I was 44, but that night, age didn't seem to matter. Somehow, I kept up. In the morning, she woke me up, grinning. "Let's take a picture," she said, grabbing my phone since hers was dead. I don't know why, but I let her. She posed with her makeup smeared across her face, and I snapped the picture, her lipstick still on my skin. Afterward, we fell back into bed, and by morning, when the hangover hit again, reality came crashing back down. I felt off, like I'd crossed a point of no return. I didn't regret it, but I knew things were only going to get messier from here. When we stepped out of the hotel into the sharp morning light, it felt surreal. The kind of morning where everything should feel normal, but the weight of what had just happened hung in the air like a storm cloud. Emma was the first to break the silence, lighting a cigarette and blowing out a long stream of smoke. Not a care in the world. "You know," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather, "you could show that picture to my dad." I stopped mid-step, staring at her. "What?" She took another drag, looking at me sideways with a grin that didn't match the seriousness of what she was saying. "I mean it. You could show him that picture of me. I don't give a fuck anymore." I shook my head, trying to understand what the hell she was getting at. "Why the hell would you want me to do that?" Emma shrugged, still grinning like this was some kind of game. "I've been wanting to get away from him for years. He won't let me go. Every time I even mention moving out or living my own life, he hits me with the whole, 'you won't survive without me' bullshit. I'm sick of it, Sam. Maybe if he sees the picture, he'll finally get it. Maybe he'll let me live my life." I just stared at her, the gravity of her words sinking in. This wasn't some spoiled, rebellious thing. This was years of being under Jason's thumb, feeling trapped, suffocated by her own father. And she was willing to use me, use what we'd done, to blow her life apart if it meant she could finally escape. I'm not going to do that, I said, but the truth was, the thought had already crossed my mind. It was just one more way to stick it to Jason, one more way to tear everything apart. Suit yourself, she said, flicking the cigarette but into the gutter. She didn't seem to care either way, like the consequences didn't even matter anymore. But if you change your mind, you know where to find me. I dropped her off at her house, and we didn't say much more. The whole drive back, her words echoed in my head. I couldn't stop thinking about the photo. The image of her makeup smeared across her face, her lipstick still staining my skin. It was like a ticking time bomb, waiting to blow everything apart. And part of me wanted that explosion. I wanted to burn every bridge, leave nothing but ashes in my wake. When I got home, I felt the tension in the air before I even walked in. Melissa's laptop was still sitting on the dining room table, a silent reminder of the revenge I'd set in motion. She had no idea what she was walking into that day. The presentation she'd been obsessing over for weeks, the one that could make or break her career. And now, I'd turned it into a disaster waiting to unfold. I didn't have to wait long. Melissa came home just before dinner, slamming the door so hard it rattled the pictures on the walls. She didn't even look at me. Her face was twisted in pure, unfiltered rage, and before I could say anything, she hurled the laptop across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, the screen shattering into pieces as it crashed to the floor. "You fucking idiot," she screamed, her voice hoarse with anger. "You did this, didn't you?" I didn't move from my spot on the couch, just stared at her with a calmness that I didn't really feel. "Maybe." She stormed across the room, her face red, eyes wild. "You sabotaged my presentation, you asshole. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I didn't even flinch. "Yeah, I know exactly what I've done." Her hands were shaking, and for a second, I thought she might actually hit me. "They fired me, Sam. I got fired in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that means? No company is going to touch me now. I'm finished." I raised an eyebrow. "Good." Her scream was a mix of rage and desperation, and she grabbed the back of a chair, throwing it to the side. "You ruined me. You've ruined everything. And for what? To get back at me? Well, fuck you, Sam, because guess what? I've been fucking Jason for years. We didn't even wait after his wife's funeral. You were too stupid to see it." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I had expected betrayal. But the timeline? The fact that they started right after his wife's funeral? It felt like a whole new level of cruelty. My stomach twisted, ball rising in my throat. How the hell had I been so blind, so stupid for so long? They had been screwing each other while I was grieving with him, supporting him through his loss, and all the while they were betraying me behind my back. I stood up, fists clenched at my sides. "Go to hell, Melissa." She stormed off, slamming the door to the bedroom. And just like that, she was gone from my life, at least for the moment. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I sat back down, my mind still buzzing from everything that had happened. And that's when I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my messages until I found Jason's name. My finger hovered over the photo of Emma for just a second before I hit send. The image, her disheveled makeup, the look on her face, was now on its way to him. The final nail in the coffin. I didn't care what came next. I just wanted him to feel the pain, the betrayal, the chaos that had consumed my life. 15 minutes later, Jason's car screeched to a halt outside my house. He didn't even bother knocking. The door flew open, and he stormed in like a man possessed, his face twisted with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. "What the fuck is this, Sam?" he yelled, holding up his phone, the image of his daughter staring back at me. I didn't even stand up. "What the fuck do you think it is?" And that's when he lunged. His fist connected with my jaw, and I staggered back, but I swung right back at him. We crashed into the coffee table, shoving each other, punching, grabbing anything we could to do damage. It wasn't like in the movies. This was raw primal. Two men, broken by betrayal, trying to hurt each other in the only way we knew how. At some point, We ended up on the floor, exhausted, bloodied, and bruised. We lay there, panting, staring up at the ceiling like two battered dogs who just fought to a stalemate. Neither of us said a word. What was there to say? We'd both fucked up our lives in different ways, and now we were just lying in the ruins. That's when I heard the sirens. 10 minutes later, the cops broke down the door. One of the neighbors must have seen us through the window, throwing punches, and called them in. They separated us, dragging us to our feet and out to the patrol cars. I spent a few hours at the station, mostly sitting in silence. Neither of us pressed charges. We were too tired, too worn out to keep fighting. Eventually, they let us go with nothing more than a warning. When I got home that night, something strange settled over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. Not better, exactly, but there was something about finally letting go of all the pent-up anger and pain that had been eating me alive. I didn't care about Melissa, Jason, or Emma anymore. They could all go to hell for all I cared. In the end, maybe I was the one who burned everything down. But after everything that had happened, I was okay with that. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to burn everything and walk away from the ashes. Melissa and I broke up faster than I expected. After all the chaos, there wasn't much left to salvage. There was no point in dragging it out. No love, no trust, just a hollow feeling where our marriage used to be. It was like watching a building burn to the ground and realizing, halfway through the fire, that there wasn't anything worth saving. We signed the papers, divided the assets, and went our separate ways. A few months passed, and we sold the house. That place used to be everything. Our home, the space where we planned our future, argued over stupid things, and even had some good memories once upon a time. But after everything that had happened, it felt more like a tomb. The walls still echoed with the arguments, the betrayal, and that final, ugly collapse. I was relieved when it sold. It meant I could finally close that chapter and move on. We both moved to different places. I found a small apartment on the other side of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine. It felt like a fresh start, something I could control. I didn't care where Melissa went. As long as it was far away, that was enough for me. I knew there was no chance of running into her at the grocery store or at any of the places we used to frequent. We both needed distance, and now we had it. Emma, though she surprised me, after we both went our separate ways, she really took charge of her life. She moved out of her dad's house, found a good job in another city, and started building her own life. I was proud of her in a strange way. We still talk sometimes, just casual conversations, nothing heavy. She checks in on me every once in a while, and I do the same. It's weird, though. We haven't seen each other in person since that night at the hotel, and I think we both know it's for the best. I never wanted to keep that going. Whatever happened between us was a one-time thing, fueled by anger and alcohol. We both needed an escape that night, but I wasn't looking to make it anything more. Some things are better left in the past. Melissa, on the other hand, didn't land on her feet quite as gracefully. The fallout from her botched presentation spread quickly. Word got around fast in her industry, and no one wanted to take a chance on her after that. Getting fired was one thing, but the rumors, the stories about what happened in that boardroom, it left her blacklisted. She tried finding work, but nothing stuck. I heard she bounced around a bit, but no company would touch her. No one wants to hire someone who humiliated themselves in front of a room full of executives. What really got to me was hearing about her and Jason. Yeah, after everything blew up, they tried to make it work. Maybe they thought that since they'd already destroyed their marriages, they had nothing left to lose. But the thing about a relationship built on lies is that it can't last. The spark they had while sneaking around behind my back burned out pretty quick when they had to face each other in the daylight. From what I heard, things went downhill fast. They both started drinking a lot. It became a nightly ritual, just the two of them in a toxic cycle of booze and bitterness. I guess they thought alcohol could help them forget, but it only made things worse. When you start drinking to drown out your problems, the only thing you end up drowning is yourself. It didn't take long for their relationship to implode. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that it all came to a head one night. They got into a nasty fight, worse than usual. Jason hit her, bad enough that she had to go to the hospital, and he ended up in jail. I don't know if she pressed charges, but he did time for it. I never asked for the details. Didn't care enough to find out. They got what was coming to them, one way or another. As for me, life started to look up. It wasn't a straight shot to happiness, but slowly, things began to get better. I've always been the type to think I could handle things on my own, that I didn't need help. But after everything that happened, I realized I couldn't carry all that weight by myself. The anger, the betrayal, the guilt, it was like a poison inside me, eating away at who I was. So, I swallowed my pride and started seeing a psychologist. It wasn't easy at first, sitting there and spilling my guts to someone who didn't know me, didn't know what I'd been through. But after a few sessions, I realized I needed it. I needed someone to help me unpack all the shit I'd buried. It was like lifting a weight off my shoulders I didn't even know I was carrying. I also went back to the bar. Gary, the bartender, had been there for me from the beginning, even if he didn't know the full story. One night, after a couple of drinks, I finally told him everything about Melissa and Jason, about Emma, about the picture, the fight, all of it. I half expected him to judge me, to look at me like I was some kind of monster, but he didn't. He just listened, nodding along like he'd heard it all before. When I got to the part about sending Jason that picture of his daughter, Gary let out a low whistle and shook his head. "Man," he said, pouring us both a shot of whiskey, "that's one hell of a story." We clinked glasses and drank, and after that, we laughed about it. Not because it was funny. None of it really was, but because sometimes that's all you can do. You laugh because if you don't, the weight of it all will crush you. Looking back on everything, I've wondered more than once if I did the right thing. Was all the revenge worth it? Did it fix anything? No, probably not. But at the same time, it gave me closure in a way I wasn't sure I'd ever find. Melissa and Jason got what they deserved. Emma found her own way out. And me? I'm still standing. So, to everyone who stuck around to read this, thanks. I needed to get it off my chest, to tell the whole story from start to finish. Life's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. But you deal with it, you move forward, and if you're lucky, you learn something from it. Did I do the right thing? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But in the end, I'm still here, and I'm still moving forward. That's got to count for something, right? Good luck out there, folks. Life's a bitch, but sometimes you just got to laugh and keep going.